What makes a town garden a magical oasis? The answer, surprisingly, can be that it's in the details. I've been talking to two top London garden designers about how the materials that you choose, your paths, your terraces, your arbours, can make all the difference and show off your planting. It's Alexandra here from the Middle-Sized Garden YouTube channel and blog, and I've been talking to top garden designers Tomoko Kawauchi and Charlotte Rowe of Charlotte Rowe Garden Design. They're showing us around a town garden that they've designed. It has lush contemporary planting and is in a series of 3 gardens. There's a front garden, a side garden and a steeply sloping back garden. There's no lawn at all. It's a series of private seating areas linked by garden paths that create a journey through the garden. And it's the details that make it special. Note how the bricks and the pavers and the stackers all work together. They're interwoven and they're repeated throughout the garden to give it a sense of harmony and calm. And it's also a garden built to evolve. That trampoline will turn into a fire pit when the children have decided that they're no longer interested in the trampoline. So it's a sign of how thoughtful garden design can really adapt to family life. So Charlotte and Tomoko, tell me what you think about when you first come to a garden, what the most important principles are. Charlotte?
Well, in general, obviously the functionality and how the family will use the garden is really important, but also the shape, space, location, borrowed landscape, those things are really important as well. But when I first came here, this was a completely different garden. It had been used as a family garden. It had a trampoline, it had, sort of climbing frame type thing. It had barriers, you couldn't see the end of the garden. It had a really large part of it was lawn, and they just weren't using the garden. They weren't coming up into the garden. So as soon as I saw it, I knew we had to open the garden up and make it enticing. So one of the things we always think about is a journey within the garden. Do you agree with that?
Yes, that's one thing we are known to input is a circulation, we call it, and more access to one destination is better. It enhances your experience in the garden.
So can you tell me how you do that with paths and patios and terraces?
So once you have one patio location decided, you need to decide which way you want to access and allow few routes to it. And then you select what is the most interesting journey we can create.
This is not a small garden, it's a medium-sized London garden. It's by no means is it small. It's a very wide garden. That was the other thing. It's not a long garden. So you have to, when you're doing that, at the same time you have to think about how you make the garden look as big as it can look. It's very important. And we're really good at breaking spaces up and making them look bigger. So functionality, journey, destination, access, circulation, location and size.
So how do you deal with the different levels, Tomoko?
Different level. So you need to decide the functionality comes first, and then what level you want to, for example, you want to use this dining space at what level, sitting at what level, because it depends on the level you get the sound level or light level changes. So you need to be aware of surroundings and where would you feel most comfortable.
So before you change any levels or do anything with levels, you have to decide where the patio, where the terrace, where
exactly.
The paths are going to
Location
be.
is so important that we rarely make the garden without deciding the purpose of the space. Sometimes we do get a brief that they want to be flexible dining and sitting area, but we normally decide at the very early on stage, this is where you sit, this is where you eat.
Depending on things like light, location, how it fits with the kitchen. So for example, at the moment we're sitting in the arbor, which the old arbor used to be the other side of the garden, but we felt this was the right place to be, plus we were putting a fireplace in here. And going back to the levels, a decision was also made that although this garden did cost quite a lot of money, one way you can save is by not changing the levels too much. You need to try and keep what you've got on site, because as soon as in London particularly, as soon as you start removing stuff, you're paying for waste. There's a waste management issue, the cost involved. So the decision was made to keep the levels not exactly as they were before, but sort of more or less, and working with those levels. Because a lot of people, when they go into gardens, both clients and designers say, oh, right, we're going to kind of completely hollow this out, and create it all one level. No, that's going to not work.
We encourage people not to change levels. We are quite strong about that because the client could waste so much money just making the ground, and you'd get very boring space. I think it's nice to have a level.
We had one client years ago who didn't really understand gardens, if you remember who he is, in North London. And a lot of gardens in North London are really steeply sloping because it's high in Hampstead and Finchley, etc., Golders Green. So often the garden goes up away from the house. And this particular client just wanted to take the whole level down. And we're talking about a 3 to 4 metre change in levels. It's a lot. It would have ended up being like a volleyball or a squash court with no light, because of course as soon as you take yourself down in a garden, you're losing light, particularly in an enclosed London or town space. So we fought that very strongly. In the end, we finally decided to compromise on about a third of the garden being pushed back. A lot of architects just have a patio, come out of the house, particularly in Regency houses where they're again quite narrow and long and go up. Have a patio, then have this massive staircase up to the next level with no planting. So the garden is moving further and further away from the house. Whereas here, as you'll see when you walk round, this has been done in a completely different way with ramping. Do you want to talk about those a bit?
So this ramping in the middle area, we have a large planting bed. The idea was this group of plants flow into the terrace space, so almost invading into the stone area, so more harder surface. So the softness comes on like flat almost.
This is very important. A lot of people just think that landscape or garden designers just do planting. Well, there are a few television programmes showing people who do that. Tomoko is a former architect, and I come from the architectural side as well. And that's not to say the planting is not important, it is. But the structure, the bone structure of the garden is the key thing. It's what we're probably well known for. If all this planting died, it would be an awful shame, but you could then replant it and you've still got a really good space. You cannot make a space out of planting. It's just not possible, particularly in a town garden. You can more in a country garden, of course. But here you have to have some structure to create that feel. So as I say, when you walk in here, you go, wow, at the planting, and it is amazing. It's almost invasive. It's fantastic. But the planting wouldn't be this planting at all without having the areas of gravel, these little patches of gravel within the paving, the fireplace, the arbor, the beautiful benches. It wouldn't be the same without those.
And how do you decide what materials to use for paving and terracing?
Yeah. So that's a very good question. This garden originally had a very dark stone, am I right saying that?
It was porcelain.
Yeah, very different feel to it. Yes, porcelain. It's not even a stone. So first thing is you need to understand what is the client looking for, what mood. And this client was looking for a big change from quite masculine garden to softer and more feminine, I suppose. So we chose for much brighter, lighter, buff colour stone, and from porcelain to stone, so more natural material.
A lot of town gardens go straight off a kitchen or a family room, so we have to make it work with that. And so we do use grey stone, actually, if there's a clear grey spectrum going on inside, palette of colours inside. But the beige is a softer look. It's more natural. And actually, this is English limestone from Wiltshire, which is really local, which is nice.
Mm.
And is there any particular material that's best for, or materials that are best for paths, patios and terraces?
We like to use natural stone and gravel. We use a lot of gravel. Some clients don't like it because it doesn't do their stilettos much good.
Or barefoot.
Or barefoot, yeah. That's the other thing. So we tend to slip paving into the gravel if we can. But some people just won't have gravel, but we like it because it's eco, it's less expensive, it's readily available, and it's really beautiful. But we don't use porcelain if we can help it. And we do a bit of decking sometimes, but not much.
And what about choosing gravel? What do we need to know if we're choosing gravel?
I think you need to choose the stone first, or whatever the majority of the floor surface is going to be, then match the gravel after.
Yeah. This one, I think, is it Cotswold Buff, this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And we put the stone in first and then we match the gravel to it.
We choose similar tone, very neutral colors, gravel. We don't rarely make contrast between stone and the gravel.
We used to when we started out, actually.
Yeah, I think the similar color works better. We want to still keep the one plane of the terrace. For example, this terrace got few gravel pockets. We don't want to make it too much of a contrast.
And when it comes to steps, what are the important things to remember about steps?
Riser and going thread steps, because outside area you need deeper and more gentle step up, while architects tend to do inside the house it's fine, you need a higher or shorter, but in external area you really need to be generous.
This is for safety reasons because of falling over. So our steps are much less shallow. I mean, it won't mean much to you, but anyone watching this who understands what we're talking about, the deepest height, the highest height we would do is 170, 180 at a pinch. But we prefer to do 130 to 150. We're all taught that. I mean, every landscape designer is taught that. Architects don't sympathise with that. And sometimes if they've designed the steps out from a house, it's a nightmare. Do you remember the one in Putney we did? It was literally like that. It's just so dangerous. And it was in porcelain. And the other thing that's really important, I know it sounds so basic, but you'd be surprised how many people don't do it. They must be identical heights and treads. Any flight of steps has to be. It's so important. But you'd be amazed what builders come in, oh yeah, I'll do your garden for you and stick some steps in. And one's, that high, the X of that one. It's so dangerous, really dangerous.
And anything else we need to know about steps, like what the best material to use is at all?
Well, stone.
Stone, you could do decking or metal. Metal grills are quite nice because it lets the lights through it. Also, you can see the plant underneath.
Well, these ones are gravel with a metal edging done with a steel. So that's just, we didn't want it too hard.
It's a wider space, a wider step that also acts as a planting shelves.
Yeah, so there is planting in the stairs, which is, again, something we do quite a lot.
And speaking of the planting, how have you done that?
I think because it's a wide, big planting space, it's very important to give a structure, but also difference in height and contrast in texture. In that way, you don't create a big blob of green. You need some punctuation in the movement and color. You need some seam color going through. For example, this garden's got a deep purple way through as a punctuation of the colors.
And some yellows, some verbascum were out earlier. They're not out now. The grass is coming up amber. Just so you know, this garden had these trees around the outside, the pleach trees. They were here already. We left them because they were so established. So was the liquid amber, that was here. And actually the amalanca. So we only put in a couple of trees here, which is unusual for us because we normally put quite a lot of trees in. We're very pro multi-stem focus feature trees in London gardens because they really give interest.
And when it comes to the furniture, there's some lovely furniture in this garden. What would you advise people to think about when they're choosing garden furniture?
Well, don't buy cheap furniture because it'll fall to bits. It's the first thing. I'm afraid outdoor furniture is quite expensive. People's views have changed on furniture. When we started the business, people were still buying just cheap table and, nice chairs. And it was quite difficult to persuade people to buy continental, mainland European furniture, but they are now.
But when it comes to colors and texture, we always recommend client go for something neutral, because these are things that if you go too much of a striking color, it might go out of fashion or trend of the clients. They might not like it a few years later.
This kind of furniture is quite very comfortable, and you can take all the cushions inside, although they can stay outside as well.
I think the volume of the furniture against volume of the space is so important.
So do you think that the problem is that sometimes people choose furniture that's too small for the space?
Oh yes, completely.
And pots. It's a real problem, and so we always recommend really large, particularly in small spaces. You've got to have large things, which people don't really understand.
And what about arbours?
Well, one of the problems we have is sometimes people want it completely covered. That then starts being more than an arbour, starts becoming a building, and then you've got to start thinking about how the water's going to run off and what it's going to look like from upstairs. you wouldn't sit out here in a storm, but you would sit out here in a drizzle. It wouldn't be a problem. It certainly gives you shade cover. You could put glass on it, but it's not really advised. And we have specified a few off-the-shelf ones, haven't we? We tend to design all these. And this is a lovely Western red cedar, beautiful arbor, and it casts lovely shadows. It looks natural.
And so do you think that a garden should have an arbor, or
No.
are there some gardens
No,
that
we don't.
If you can
no.
create enough interest in height
Yeah,
by
yeah.
trees,
Yeah.
that's obviously
Most gardens we do
better.
don't have arbors. We try and push people away from them, actually. It's quite a lot of money. This garden can cope with it. Plus we've got a fireplace, so it actually makes a destination. And the owners of this garden, their first winter, they had their Christmas outside here in front of the fire, which is lovely, in the middle of the winter. But if you put an arbor too close to the windows, the bad news, isn't it? Lots of shade.
It works here.
It works.
It sort of creates a spot for you. It's like on its own tempo, and it frames the view. If you look out anywhere, every view is a frame.
And what about front gardens? Because this is a beautiful front garden. What do people have to bear in mind when they're thinking about a front garden?
Front garden is slightly different game because you have to think with the front of the house as a background. So it needs to go with the style of the house. We tend to go less modern, more traditional, to go with a
Front
period
gardens.
of the house was built.
And also, there's a thing called the SGLD rules about drainage, which in London is crucial because of all the flooding issues there have been over the last few years. So in other words, it depends from borough to borough, but you have to make a large portion of a front garden permeable and free draining. And it's really important. We do obey that because we believe it's true and it's important. And that's one of the problems that, the stone pavings that are free draining and permeable are not very nice. So here we were very lucky because actually the garden is large and it's not the driveway. So it's more challenging when you've got a garden in London with a two-way driveway because you've got to combine it and make it look beautiful but accommodate cars. But of course this one has got its own separate garage because this house is unusual. It's in its own site. It's a detached house, which in central London is unusual. So we've actually got here the main garden, we've got the side passage, which has also got planting in it. We've got what we call the side garden next to the garage, which was never used before. It's just a plain bit of grass, and then the lovely front garden. And we replanted and repaved that. We didn't do that from scratch. So
Lovely. And is there any other advice about design detail that you would give to people when they're thinking about designing their garden?
keep it simple.
Yeah, I agree. Keep it simple. Don't do twirly-whirly decorative details. Because design detail should speak to the design concept itself. If your garden is contemporary, detail should follow that style.
And we tend to do rectilinear designs in rectilinear spaces. I mean, not always. We have introduced curves occasionally, but generally speaking, we reserve curves and flowing lines in the hard landscaping to country gardens because it really, really tests the space if you have curves and circles and ovals, which we do occasionally, in a rectangular space, which is a limited space. So we tend to design in a rectilinear manner, which not everybody likes that. But we've introduced the softness with the planting because we don't do hard planting, we do quite soft planting, if that makes sense.
It does. It does. If you're interested in transforming your garden, then don't miss Charlotte and Tomoko's 5 top garden design tips and 2 mistakes to avoid coming up next. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.